Welcome to Discover the Difference. I'm your host, Jamie Reid, alongside my pal and co-host, Gabriel Erle. Today, we have a special guest on in Scott Huesing. Scott is most known as the best-selling author of Echo in Ramadi, and it summarizes his time of going into one of the most dangerous cities in the world back in 2006 and 2007 with the, hang on, I want to get this right, with the Echo Company 2nd Battalion 4th Marines. Scott also brings just a ton of charisma to everything he does. He answers everything with just brutal honesty, and I'll challenge you to find the one question Gabe asked Scott that he said no one has ever asked him in all the hundreds, maybe even thousands of podcasts he's ever been on. Scott's a truly inspirational hero in American history, so enjoy our episode with Scott Huesing. So sitting here with Scott Huesing, 24 years of service with the Marines, 10 deployments, best-selling book, and Echo in Ramadi. You run nonprofits, you're a highly sought-after public speaker. The list goes on and on. I think the question always comes into my mind when I run into people who have a decorated career like you is, when did this come to fruition? You know, were you 5 years old and you knew you wanted to be in the military, or how does this come about?
Nope. Wasn't that grandiose. Trust me, man. Again, not a secret. I barely graduated high school. I shared this with you guys. Yeah, 1.24 GPA. Not really college material. Not even high school material at that stage.
Does that get you out of high school at 1.24?
Barely. I actually failed gym. I was a bad kid, and I failed gym because I never went. So I skipped a lot of school. My first car was a motorcycle. Not a lot of supervision or guidance. So I actually had to go to summer school, make up those credits. And then that summer, my buddy calls me, says, "Hey, man, you got to come down here." "Where?" "The Marines. You got to meet these guys." And so up until that point, I'd been fighting and drinking underage and running from the cops. I get caught by the cops, got thrown in jail a couple of times. And so I go down to meet these recruiters, and you know, you've been there, Phil. They're got a cool office, the posters and all the decorations and the uniforms, and they talk mad smack. Big salesman. Probably one of the best sales models in the world, because they're selling your life away, basically. Like, join this club. It's great. And I thought to myself, there is no bigger group of risk takers than the Marines. So I signed up, and that was it. I knew squat about what the Marines did, other than maybe I saw Heartbreak Ridge, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And, you know, I enlisted, fought in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and soon realized the value of a college education. And then I hung up my rifle for a little bit as a machine gunner in the reserves, and went to college at Illinois State, graduated with a much more respectable GPA. And then, you know, some 15 years later, that's kind of what thrust me into writing this story after I was deployed to Iraq's deadliest city, and sharing that story about the young men and women under my command as we battled day in and day out. That's where it took me. And then after which, after 24 years, both enlisted and commissioned, I decided to move on and challenge myself.
So just to step back for a second, you said that, you know, you had all the success in high school, and you went to...
That's sarcasm. This episode brought to you by sarcasm.com.
What was it that, you know, was it something that happened in Desert Storm and Desert Shield that said, hey, there's a value in education to go back? Because, you know, you didn't really value that before. What was that change?
Well, the military, not solely the Marine Corps, have a brilliant plan on instilling mission success in every single person at every single level. And I share that story about, you know, the shit childhood that I grew up with. And I was an abused child, but I had a lot of stuff going on. And then the success in college, 6 years later, that's a direct testament to the leadership and discipline that America's military instills in these young men and women. And I say that because I never want to not give them credit for that, because everything I've had in my life, any success I've had, all of the amazing people, including sitting here with you guys today, has been brought to me through that organization, through the Marine Corps. And you look across the I-8 and the 5, that's where I was born, over there at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. And every time I draw past, I was like, that's where I was born, because that really is where it all began.
Well, is it common through how they're setting that up for people to, disenfranchise, I guess would maybe a word, and leave and go to a traditional college route and then come back?
There's programs in the military that you can transition from enlisted to officer, and then there's other programs where you go straight to college to an officer program, or there's ROTC programs, or there's the academy, West Point, Annapolis, VMI. Those are all commissioning routes. But for me, the decision actually, once I got out, I wasn't even planning on going back in the Marine Corps. I was actually planning on working for U.S. Federal Marshal Service, and I was a little older than the average bear in college, which worked to my benefit in many ways. But there was a hiring freeze, and it was a stalemate, and I said, man, there's no way I can wait tables and bartend for another year. And this young Sergeant Connor, man, I got to find this kid. I got to find my paperwork, and I owe him some beers. He just calls me. He says, hey, you want to come down? He goes, run a PFT and take a physical, and I can get you to officer candidate school in January. And right there, I was done. And that it just fell in my lap. And it was through this young sergeant. And, sergeants make the Marine Corps go round. They really are. The backbone of the Marine Corps. Yeah.
So in your book, your best-selling book, Echoes from Ramadi, you talk about this mentorship and developing, these younger, the younger troops. And it sounds like that's something that you got. Now, my question is, while you're doing that, and you talk about how you're trying to teach them to avoid pitfalls, and in those experiences and the hardest situations in Ramadi, when you look back, what mistakes did you make, and then what did you learn from those mistakes?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we talk about this. Is one of the things I always like to share is the losses, not sit around and tell war stories and all the fighting and the friction and slinging lead and killing bad guys. Like that happens. That's the nature of war. But really, what happens after that or during, and sharing the losses and the failures of what I didn't do or what I did do, I think are really important. One of the things, and this isn't based on any regret. I never use that word regret. Things happen, and you make decisions based off the information you have at hand. It's never 100% full when you have to make that decision. But a lot of those senior enlisted guys, the staff non-commissioned officers, I probably never got those guys together enough. So when you're translating that to the private sectors, you're talking about executive level staff dealing with middle managers and really making time to pull them in and have a dialogue with them and a conversation, just sitting down and say, hey, Gabe, you've been with the company for a year now. This is actually the first time we sat down. I mean, isn't that odd? Like the first time your boss pulls you in. But this happens a lot in the private sector, and in whether you're working at municipal level or the state level, federal, private sector, there's so many people that say, yeah, my boss never talks to me like that. But having those conversations like, where are you from, Gabe? Like, how many kids do you have? Like, really understanding your people. And is it feasible to understand the lives of an organization of 300 people? I'd say yes. 1,000 people. I had a battalion commander, Christian Ortman. He's a general now. Rising star. I love him. Just texted him yesterday. He has a didactic memory. And he would go down in the ships, and he'd be like, hey, Corporal Johnson, how's your wife and that new kid doing? Are they still in Carlsbad? And I'm thinking to myself again, how does this guy do it? But he cared. And I talked about that in that night is, you can teach people a lot of things. You can teach lieutenants and sergeants tactics and shooting and running. But you can't teach people to care. I could never do that. And if you don't care about the organization, if you don't care about the mission, the success, and the people that you lead, that in my case, it entrusted their lives to me and their parents and their husbands and wives, then you got no business being in the Marine Corps. You got no business being in the infantry.
Well, that's a little bit of a leadership style, though, right? If
Yep.
I mean, if you have 250 guys under your command, can you influence that perspective by showing it and it cascading down, or how do you get to a place where you have confidence that what you want done is going to be executed at every level of a command with 250 people in it?
I think you have to put some faith in the system, the training program that we have, from entry-level training to advanced level training, and that we focus on a decentralized model of command where you issue mission type orders and those are trickled down, and you've got multiple layers of leadership. And in the absence of that, you always want those guys to be able to operate off of what we call the commander's intent. So the commander is the CEO, the COO, whoever it is running that organization. You have to give broad-based guidance on what it is for their success. And I always want it to be simple. And I'm sure you guys have seen this. I know you've seen it, is you walk into a unit or a company and there's a commander's philosophy or the company statement on the wall, and it's a page-long soliloquy about this dude, and he's got his photo and there's flags behind him and he's got medals on his chest, and it's like, oh, this looks great. And you're standing at the pisser reading this. Like, that's not how I wanted the guys to remember me, is like peeing on a urinal cake, and that's my mission, commander's guidance to these guys. Mine was short, is we will train hard, we will fight, and we will win. Now, I've been retired from the Marines for almost 13 years, and there's still Marines to this day that can recite that to me, because it's a model I took out of the page book. I stole it from many people, and Pete Carroll's one of them. Yeah. You can't stand in front of a group of 300 people or 3,000 people, and when you walk away, have them remember what you want them to do. You failed as a leader, man. Like, that's basics 101, but there's so many general officers or senior level executives, they don't boil it down as what they want to do. So now I got Lance Corporal Gabe and Lance Corporal Jamie in a house held up in the deadliest city in Iraq. There's lead flying back and forth, and it's bad. It's a bad day. And you guys look at each other, and this is how I saw it going down, is you look at one guy and he says, hey man, this shit's getting pretty bad. Yeah, I know. What do you think the CO would want us to do? Win. That's it. At the end of the day, all the training, all the ammo, everything else will get them through.
So that kind of takes us to, you're in Ramadi in 2006, leading Echo Company. What, can you give like real life examples of like what you're talking about, where you have this mantra, and you feel like they're going to follow it?
Every single day, 5, 6, 7 times a day, we were in direct contact with a very well-trained insurgent force. And it was literally the Super Bowl of fighting for infantry guys. It just didn't get any more intense than that. And that's what we trained for years in some cases. For most, it was their first time in combat, these young 18, 19-year-old kids. And that was exhibited every day. And those young Marines took care of each other and me better than anything I'd ever experienced. I've said that a million times in a million interviews, but there's no other statement that I could speak that would articulate how well those guys dealt with that intense type of pressure and that friction that was constantly surrounding those guys as they fought day in and day out. So to give one example, we need a longer podcast. There's just countless examples day in and day out where you're sending a sergeant, and for most cases, the sergeants in Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines had already done one deployment to Ramadi. So now they're the salty, seasoned 20-year-old, 21-year-old sergeants, right? And these guys are being tasked to go patrol this city of 300,000 people. Sometimes they're out for hours on end with 12 other guys, and they're in charge of their lives. And they've got a lot of assets surrounding them and supporting them, but I'm not there with them directly every single time. Now, I was out there a lot with them because you do have to lead from the front. You do have to do all the things that you are tasking these Marines to do personally. And I was always one of those guys. Probably they didn't like it a whole lot when I was out with them, but no one likes having the boss over their shoulder out front, but sometimes you have to do that. But these young sergeants were always prepared to accomplish the mission, take care of the Marines and sailors around them. And that was something that, they're running 10, 12 patrols a day. And so you've got these squads rotating. They're working off of very little food, very little sleep, and the body becomes accustomed to that. And again, I look back and, it's like so many years ago. It is like it was just yesterday. I like it when people ask questions like that too, because I feel after you write a book and you do so many interviews, and I've done like hundreds and hundreds of podcasts and interviews, I never want to be like this rhetoric, so when you pull a question out like that, get something new, man. I appreciate that. No, I'm serious.
Well, it's not just rhetoric though, because a couple things you've said are directly transferable in the business world. And I would argue what you said about the boss being in with the troops. If the boss is willing to do everything the troops are doing, they probably love having you out there. And I think that is something that you see in the civilian world too, where it's when the boss doesn't do the things that they're asking everybody else to do that, they don't want them out there. And what you said about the commander's intent and the clarity of that, it's something that we echo so much. When people are speaking or giving presentations or trying to close proposals, there's this natural instinct, I think, for a lot of people to provide all the information they could possibly provide. And we're the opposite. We're like, pull that shit back. What's the thing they really need to take away from this? And when we create visuals, what's the emotion we can create? Because the words they're not going to remember any of that stuff. So I think a lot of the things that you're saying are directly transferable, and we echo and experience every day in our world. So I think that's awesome that you come from a military background, and it's almost arrive at the same place that I think our philosophy is without that experience.
Yeah, and I think you're capturing this human element, and this in your book you talk about these personal connections. Why was it so important to tell that story? And obviously there's a lot of people that come out of the military, or there's some people that come out of the military and write books, but not a lot. So what was it that was that impetus that said, this is an important story and I really want to tell it?
Well, I'm not an English major. I'm not a history major. I am not a formally trained writer, but it is creating the importance of that affect, whether it's business or writing. Like at the end of every page or the end of every chapter, what is the affect? What is the reader feeling? What are the people you lead feeling by your presence? The presence of the words on the page. Whatever the case is, there's so many. It's that emotion and that element of this human connection that is really important. But as I wrote the story, the outset was to, one, capture a very important piece of military history, because I didn't want the Second Battle of Ramadi to fall into the shadows of the Fallujahs or the Kandahars or the Baghdads. It was a very significant fight, one of the bloodiest periods of urban combat that really redefined what we knew as fighting as Marines in the city. And two was to share the stories of these young men and women and the families that supported us as we fought, and the families, our amazing Gold Star families, that continue to support us to this day. Those who have lost sons and daughters from this war, or these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, because I think that for me, they have to be told, because it's essential that we never forget the people that make those sacrifices. And it's tough because that will never end for them. When you lose a kid, it's forever. And we're very fortunate to be surrounded by these people, because despite losing their son, they inherited another 250 sons by proxy, and we love them for that. So it's pretty overwhelming, to constantly be surrounded by that. And even here in California, it's great because I go up every year to the Marines Memorial Club in San Francisco to the Gold Star Mothers Annual, and the first year they didn't hold it was last year, and it was tough. I mean, the families were struggling, but it is very important to, not from a historical piece, but from that human piece and those are the stories I really love to tell. Stories about people, not the journalistic, chronology and geography tied together on the battlefield, and those are important stories as well. But that's not how I write, and I struggle with it for a long time about how I speak, how I engage with people, how I write, and I've just come to terms with the fact I'm a very emotional person. I don't let my emotions get away, but there's also people that could come on the podcast and just sit here and say yes, I was in the city and we fought. It's very hard, and nothing comes through on that. It's still a great interview, but that's not me. And I see people like that sometimes, and I'm a little envious. But then I also understand they've got limitations too, because you've all had interviews with people or worked with people in the business, and they're talking to a speed bump in the parking lot, and you're thinking, man, I can't wait to get out of this interview. And I think we talked about that too at Gen X was, things about leadership and even writing, which, I still do. One of the most important things I shared with everybody that night was one of the things I learned was to be a better listener. And the irony of that is I'm sitting here blathering on a podcast, or I go speak on a stage in front of 3,000 people or whatever it is becoming a better listener is tough. And as I do my podcast on the Break It Down show, it's one of the great things I've learned from Pete Turner, who brought me in on the show. And you ever listen to Dan Rather interview with Kenny Rogers?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen that one. What happened?
Go ahead.
No, you share the story.
No, go ahead.
So Dan Rather's doing the 60 Minutes interview with Kenny Rogers, legendary country singer, late Kenny Rogers. And he gets him pinned down, and they're talking about the careers and all this. And right towards the end of it, Rather just sits there, Rather-esque, and he says, regrets.
Not awkward.
Just waits.
Dead silence. But then he's such a great listener from Rogers, this big gregarious dude with his flowing white hair and beard, and he starts going on about his family and really pulls the thread on that. And Rogers kind of breaks down and he's just like, yeah, I wish I would have been there more for my family. I was so involved in my job and singing career and all this. He's like, I wish I could have gone back and spent more time with my family. And I think guys in the military, guys that are hugely successful in business or in the entertainment industry, I think that's a great reminder to really understand those moments in life with your kids or your family, they go back pretty fast. It's not just a bumper sticker that they grow up so fast. That happens as I have a senior in high school now, so it's tough. Yeah,
for sure.
So you talked, I remember you talking a lot about when you look back on your career and you say, I wish I was a better listener. I remember sitting next to your wife and nudging her. And so besides that idea of, listening to a spouse or listening, this is something that we talk about a lot in leadership. But what did that mean? Why is that something that when you look back where, you wish you were a better listener? And then how would that have, how would you have done your job better?
It's interesting because there's so many different levels. Even as a young enlisted Marine to being a junior officer to a field grade officer, there's so many opportunities where you can listen. And I want to state that when I say be a better listener, normally I'm thinking in my head's telling me I should have listened to my subordinates more. Is not my boss more. The boss is going to be heard. I never really think about that. I've never said that out loud, but I'm always thinking that in my head is what I'm talking about is these young 18-year-old kids who have these great ideas. Now, you can't field everything in the suggestion box and put it in place as a practice or a policy. You just can't, because a lot of the ideas, let's face it, are nuts. Sir, we need to always wear our watch caps underneath our helmet when it gets below 60 degrees. Like, great, not doing that. But I think that's one of the things that I really, that was just kind of an epiphany I had. Like, I was thinking about junior guys, but also it was taught to me early on in the game was never miss an opportunity to keep your mouth shut in front of a senior officer. So when you check in to a new outfit or a new company, a new boss, new division, just sit there. Like, I could sit here in this chair on the podcast. It'd be pretty boring, but I just wait for you guys to field questions. And then I could say, yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. But you're also doing a lot of things. You're giving that person who you're in charge of or who's in charge of you the opportunity to be heard. And then one of the most important things, too, is you can read body language. You can read all of those nonverbal cues that people are doing. And Gabe's readjusting his chair. He's trying to model me right now. He's like doing all this stuff.
About power pose.
No, you know how important that is. And you can attest to this, too, is that being in the military is a people business. It's a people business. So
I mean, it's another thing that you just said that's so transferable. I want our whole sales team to listen to this part, because the biggest problem we have with salespeople is they go in to talk. We're like, you're not there to talk. You're there to ask questions. Like, that's how you set up a sell, is by question after question after. You want to get that person across the table from you to eventually be like, dude, I've told you everything. Who the heck are you? Why are you here?
Yeah.
And if we can get them to that point, that's where they're going to have their best opportunity for success. So it's just funny as you're saying some of these things, but you like actually made me have a vision of being behind some, cylinder block house wall when you were saying Lieutenant Gabe and Lieutenant Jamie, and visioning, lead flying over our heads.
They did. That was quite the leap. You were Lance Corporal.
I told you I didn't have the nomenclature. What was I?
Yeah,
Lance Corporal. Lance Corporal, Jamie. And probably Lieutenant Gabe. But I literally visualized it, and it was making me think, like, how do you prepare those guys in those moments to control themselves? Like, what tools do you or the military give them to calm themselves down and deal with that without losing their mind?
Well, we don't. We like to instill a sense of unknown chaos at all times and work under the worst conditions with the least funding, with the worst gear. And I think it breeds this perpetual state of pissed offedness that at any given moment we're so angry and ready to take out our frustrations. Anybody that raises the flag when we go to war, they're going to get all of that energy directed towards them. So, and when you're a young kid, it's pretty easy. But as from a leadership challenge, I wrote about this. I use an analogy. I've said it a couple times. Is the real challenge for me at that level of command, being in charge of 250 independent minds on the battlefield, these young men that were tasked with doing these amazing feats of heroism day in and day out, and to have to take another human life, like, that's not a human response. Like, you can't be trained to do that. No one does that naturally unless you're a psychopath. And to task those young men to do that, I ordered them to do it before we crossed the line of departure. And I looked into their face and I ordered them to kill, because I never wanted them to hesitate when it came down to that singular decision to look through the scope of that rifle, squeeze the trigger, and feel the recoil of that weapon and take another human life. It's an unnatural act. The real challenge as a leader, and because I wanted that burden to be mine, because when they left that city, I didn't want that to weigh on them, because that was my order to kill. I had to order them to kill. And that was important. And a lot of the guys came back to me. But real challenging was to get them to go from 60 to 0. To get you with a minimal amount of training from graduating boot camp across the street here, the School of Infantry, and then be thrust into the world's deadliest city, give you a box of ammunition and a machine gun, and say, there's a target, that's your enemy, engage. You can go from 0 to 60 like that. Without question, I know he's going to accomplish the mission. But to get that same 18-year-old kid to go from 60 to 0, to back off that trigger, to back off the gas pedal, That's a real leadership challenge. And that's where your commander's intent comes in. That's where all of those things like rules of engagement come in. Who's a good guy? Who's a bad guy? Shoot, don't shoot. All those things that we war game and go through before we're putting those young men and women in those situations. The leadership aspect of supervision and making sure that your subordinate leaders also know that, hey, if you don't do this, there's going to be repercussions. And it's not just punitive. These are repercussions on lives, not just our own souls to carry that off if we do something wrong, take the wrong life, but you're now affecting the lives of an entire different culture. And we talk about this and that understanding of culture, not just as you're fighting enemies on the battlefield, but we talk about that in the business world and the entertainment world and understanding different cultures and how before you engage in that fight, before you engage in that business decision, you need to understand that culture. We talked before the show about public speaking and, some of the stages I did. And I want to share, I'll share the Vegas story with you, but I think one of the things is we were talking about being a speaker is, I don't know whatever speakers get paid. Everybody sets their own price, and you have to understand your value. I know what my value is. I know what all the things that I've worked for in my life. I know what to charge people. I know what I'm worth. And a lot of times that's a sticker shock for people. But regardless of that, is what people don't understand is it's not just an hour on stage for me. It's doing the research, understanding that culture, understanding that audience, understanding what they need before I show up there. It's the day of travel, getting there. It's all of the introductions, all of those people pulling a little piece of this, the people they brought in. Then it's standing on the stage with the lights on, and you're picking the scab open, and you're just bleeding in front of 600 or 6,000 total strangers. And then everybody applauds, and you get off the stage. And then there's another 6 hours of dinners and drinks and people pulling and pulling. Then there's another day of travel. So when you are bringing a speaker in to your organization, those of you out there who hire speakers or whatever, that's what you get with me. I don't know. There's some people that probably give the same exact speech every single time. I don't do that. I always tailor it to that organization. And I think that's a great segue into, I'll share that story with you, because before the show, we're talking about this new business venture I was in, Fly Pie Pizza in Henderson, Nevada, with my business partner, Anthony Zucker, who created the show CSI. Most people have heard of CSI. Most people don't know Anthony's name, but he's always the first name up there. Brilliant dude. We started Fly Pie Pizza, and then you asked me, what was the question?
Like how did you get involved in a restaurant business?
Yeah, how did I become a pizza mogul, among other things? Because it was a great opportunity. Anthony approached me and said, this is an amazing drive-through pizza franchise. It's going to be a franchise. We're going to have stores pop up. And I didn't want to be the guy driving down I-5 past In-N-Out and think, fuck. I remember when I got offered a share at X amount of dollars, and now I'm driving on the East Coast.
Your Dan Rather's regret.
Yeah. Yeah. 5 years from now, you're like, Scott, regrets.
I think the thing that got me, though, was how you met him.
Yeah. So I got asked, I told you, I got asked to speak, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago at the International Convention of Crematoriums and Funeral Homes Associations.
Sexy.
Yeah, I know. Everybody, I always get that weird look like, why would anyone go speak to that group? Especially a guy like me who's this, door-kicking Marine, combat vet. Like, when I was asked, and my answer is always the same, why wouldn't I?
That's like talking to insurance guys, right?
No, but why? Okay, I'll go talk to insurance guys. Dial it up, man. But why wouldn't I why wouldn't a guy with my experience go talk to 600 industry professionals in Las Vegas, Nevada, this group of people that run the entire funeral business, who every single day when they come to work, they have a total stranger walk through their front door of their business on the very worst day of their life with all of that trauma and all that baggage, and they dump it, barf it on their table, and they have to deal with their trauma, compartmentalize that, and still be successful in business. I absolutely want to talk to that group and share my story and my lessons of wins and losses with that group so they can see it through my lens. And I thought, this is great. And it was an amazing event. It was like SHOT Show for funeral homes. They had all the booths set up, and there was all this like cool stuff. And one of the booths was Anthony Zucker. He's like me. He's not just the creator of CSI and every single CSI, by the way. He's got business ventures. He's in the pizza business. He's in the funeral home business. And so I meet him, and we go to dinner. My buddy Andy that invited me up, Andy Lopez, he's just a great dude. And he's a Marine, of course. He says, hey, we're going to dinner with Anthony. So we just kind of hit it off, had a little bromance. And then I started writing a documentary, and I called Anthony up. I says, hey, you want to hear his pitch? So I called him and pitched him and told him about the documentary. He interrupts me halfway through the pitch. He's like, I'm in, 1,000,000%. Write it. Get this fucking thing written. Get it back to me in 30 days. I'm like, all right, I'll get it back to you in 10. So that's how I started my introduction into filmmaking, which is what we're doing now. So
that's awesome.
So
yeah.
Here you are, you're retiring from the military, right? And you're going to go through this transition. How did you go from, a soldier
60 to 0.
Yeah, basically 60 to 0 from being a soldier to, writing a book, opening up a pizza place, speaking in front of thousands of people as a public speaker, and then there's probably 7 or 8 other things you're doing. What was that transition like? And did you know that this was the way that your life was going to take you?
I went from 60 to 100, man. I don't know if you guys are doing the
way
math.
you just described it, I'm like, I got it wrong.
Yeah, I'm not a greeter at Walmart, man, just picking weeds on my ranch in Riverside County. I really feel that has really been the thing that sustains me, is constantly staying engaged, constantly staying busy. There's a lot of days where if I'm not super busy, I think that's when I feel the most anxiety or that the most pressure, like I should be doing something. And I never use the R word to any of those guys who've made transitions. Never use the R word, because I work more now. It's a different type of work because it's not a job, but it's a lot of work. Writing a book is a lot of work. Writing a film is a lot of work. Coordinating a film, a lot of work. Running 2 nonprofits, a lot of work. So doing all those things, I think, just constantly staying engaged, and then being a person that really shares my network too, I think has been pretty vital to not soccer mom my contacts. Because if anybody asks me like, oh, do you know Phil? I'll be like, yeah, man, here's his number. And I'll do a text intro. I'll be like, hey, over to you 2 guys for awesomeness. Because he knows at the end of the day, I'm legit in the sense that I'm pretty transparent. And if I give you my phone number or you give me, I'm not going to share that with some toolbox who's just going to hit you up for a sales pitch or ask you for something. It's usually going to be something meaningful.
Yeah.
I think I already sent him I already sent you Kevin's number.
Yeah.
I'm like, you got to have this guy on the show. Like another vastly successful entrepreneur, military dude, Patriot Vacation Rentals. And I'm like, yeah, this is the first guy that popped in my head when he started talking to me about C3 and insurance and, all this stuff. And I was like, that's what keeps me going I don't think there's anything wrong if you want to just move to Montana and go fly fishing. I can do that for 3 days max, I think. And then I got to be at it. I got to be doing it.
Phil was talking with us before this about the transitions and, some of the nonprofits he's involved with veterans transitioning. And somehow we got on the conversation about athletes. I know you're not a pro sports guy, but we had Nick Hardwick, who is a center for the Chargers and team captain and all that. When he talked, he had a definitive thought in his mind what the transition would look like. And then when he went through it, he said in retrospect, it was way harder. And the reason was because he had this militant lifestyle. It was like, I knew every decision I made was it going to make me a better football player or not? And so it was really easy decision tree. And then he described when he transitioned out, it was like walking through the corridor out into a big open field where every question was unknown of how it's going to impact his life or better him or not. And so he kind of struggled to find his way. Did you have that kind of moment, or did you have a definitive transition plan, or how'd you deal with it?
Yeah, I planned it early. There's a lot of senior senior guys in the military, they'll go 20, 25, 30 years. And I talk to them. They were peers of mine or guys that worked for me. And they're coming up on that retirement, that pinnacle, that fulcrum point of they know something's going to tip on the other side. I said, what are you going to do? Man, sometimes it is crickets. They have no plan. I said, so you've spent the last 2-3 decades of your life telling other people what to do, how to be successful, how to transition, but you haven't formulated a plan for yourself. This happens a lot. Yeah. It wasn't the case with me because I was kind of a self-starter in that capacity. I already had a job up in LA well before I transitioned out. I never really took a whole lot of stock in the military transition program because I think it's garbage. It's not tailored to the individual. It's not like Musselman and the Honor Foundation, which tailors that transition program. There's your plug for the Honor Foundation, Joe. Joe's been on my podcast too, and I think we were actually talking about that on the Breakdown show with Joe. Is that the transition and tailoring that because you're a product of that, and
of the Honor Foundation.
Yeah.
I think it's that's kind of the rare case, right? For you, Scott, like to have that plan. I think one of the struggles for a lot of guys is, when they get out, it's not only about what they're going to be doing, but it's kind of that purpose. Because before you were involved in something bigger than yourself.
You had a cause.
And you had your brothers and sisters around you for that. And so when you lose kind of all these different aspects, it's mental, it's spiritual, it's physical too. Kind of the holistic being, it becomes a real challenge for guys. And, they're still kind of at 60, can't bring it back down to 0 to kind of reset when they need to and feel just lost. And it's a real struggle. And I think that's, extremely commendable what, Save the Brave is doing. And I know, give you a chance to talk about, that a little bit more, but, building the network and providing that mechanism for these guys to reestablish that camaraderie, like, hey, you're not alone in this.
That's a good transition. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so 6 years ago, we started SaveTheBrave.org, and it was one of my young saw gunners. He's also the owner of Bastards American Canteen, affectionately named after the Magnificent Bastards in Downey, California, and coming next month to Temecula. Amazing restaurant. So Nick calls me. This was shortly after one of our Marines, one of my squad leaders, Simon Lidke, had killed himself in Minnesota, and we wanted to do something. So Nick did all the work, got all the 501c3 paperwork put together, and then he calls me. He says, hey, sir, would you consider being the executive director? I said, absolutely, if we do this the right way, help the right people for the right reasons, and grow at the right rate. And everybody does it for free because that's part of what sustains me, but I also know I got to keep the lights on at my ranch and feed horses. But that other side of the nonprofit is really important. And I was reminded of why we do that and that connection. And then we went from transition to, this is important, it ties into transition, which we were just talking about, is I really believe that at the beginning and end of every day, if you're not helping other people, you're not helping yourself. And that's key to your balance in life. That's at least key to me for my balance. And what Save the Brave does is we provide outreach programs for combat veterans who are struggling with post-traumatic stress. The goal of that is to empower them, to connect them in a safe space and really empower them. And we were talking about this at a lunch last week and the magic of what we do. And maybe offshore fishing isn't your thing because we started 6 years ago with one fishing trip. This year, 34 fishing trips. Yeah, nuts. So hence the reason we brought Michelle in as our CBO because she is amazing. And then we brought another board member in and we're just growing at that rate, but it's at the right rate. We can manage this. But all these veterans that come to us and they've all got their own different types of trauma, but they go out and maybe you said hit the reset button. And that's what made me think of this is sometimes you do need to hit the reset button. And what SaveTheBrave.org does is we provide a mechanism that is that big red reset button. So let's say you're zeroed out and all of a sudden you've got stress and anxiety, or you're missing something, and that thermometer starts to rise. And you get to that level, and maybe it peaks at 100 before it bursts. Maybe you're at 80, and you understand, like, man, it's getting pretty hot. And I need to either hit the reset button, go on a fishing trip, go on some sort of outreach program, whatever it is you do. Maybe it's hiking, biking, fishing. I don't care what it is, but do that. But maybe you reach that level at 75, 80, and you understand that it's not the fishing that's going to reset me. It's doing something for others. Right there is that point where we empowered some other guy or girl that they understand that, like, the whole reason they brought me on that one trip, I don't have to go back fishing. What I need to do is help someone else. And that's how we've gone from 1 to 34 fishing trips, is because we're empowering other people. There's guys in Texas who are veterans, like, how can I help? I want to do this. Or there's civilians, and they say, I have a boat. You can use it whenever you want. And it's really a cool feeling. And that's not what we seek out, is just to feel good about ourselves. I think at the end of the day is we're just one conduit that allows people who are struggling in some shape or form to feel good about themselves. And those civilians that want to understand veterans or want to help veterans, it's not just a bumper sticker. There's so many ways you can help. And the key thing, too, is everybody has trauma in their life. Military doesn't own that. You don't have to be in combat to have trauma or loss or suffer. We don't own those words. You can deal with all of those things in your daily life. You deal with it when you go to work. You deal with it when you're mowing the lawn. Yeah, anything. Yeah. So what we do at Save the Brave has been really transformational, because the metric we use to measure our success is through that one guy or girl that comes back maybe the next day in an email, or maybe it's a year later and they say something like, hey, I started this, or I want to do this, or I got a job, or I got back together with my girlfriend. And right there, that's our metric of success.
So how do you create that experience? I mean, is it just going out fishing and connecting with nature, or what is it that, I've gone fishing before, and it is, it does give a little bit of, that soothing feeling, but how do you really make that effective?
It's different for everybody. I really see it from a linear standpoint. Is you drive up, first you have to make the commitment to show up. So you got to get up at ass crack 30. You go up to Huntington Beach or San Diego or wherever else they're fishing out of, and you show up at the pier. That's a really big step, just showing up, to get out of yourself, get out of your head, get out of your comfort zone, and then you show up. You're going to be surrounded by dudes you don't even know, and guys you probably never met. You go on a boat, and you're going to go out to the middle of the ocean. Showing up is 1. 2 is getting on the boat. 3 is driving past the channel marker. And once you're out there, your cell phone is like a rock in your pocket. You might as well use it for a sinker. That's all it's good for. So you're forced to disconnect, but at the same time connect. So you're out on the boat, you're getting this salt water therapy. And oh, by the way, the guys that take us fishing are all pros. Andrew P. and the guys at Stoked on Fishing and Stoked on Fishing Charters up in Huntington Beach, and Dr. Dan and that whole team, and Fox West Sports, they're pros. So a guy like me, I don't even know how to bait the hook, dude. I just go up there. I can't go on all these trips. I go on a couple, maybe, and I don't even know how to bait the hook. So the guys, they like, oh, here, sir, I'll get that for you. And I'm like, I'm not a fisherman, but I really enjoy the experience. And it's that connection. And when you get back, and if you go to our website, there's an amazing video that Frank Ruiz put together called Baja Sueño, where we took a bunch of guys down to Mexico to fish. And you see them kind of dreading the drive down there, and there's a little jocularity in the vans. And then they get up early, they go out on the boat, and then when they start landing these fish, and they're crushing tuna and rockfish, and when they come back, the transformation from their faces, you can just see that expression. So I don't know. I think that's cool. It is cool. And every time I watch the video, I'm like, those are my boys. So there's a lot of people doing this in the veteran space. There's over 40,000 plus VSOs that are registered with the IRS. But again, there's some that are shady. There's some that are great. I always, like we were talking about earlier, I always want to know where the money goes. Like, don't tell me what you're doing. Show me what you're doing. And we're pretty proud of that fact because we're our 100% nonprofit. None of our board members take a salary. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing if your nonprofit does, because you got to pay the right people for the right job for the right reason. But and it also doesn't make you look like it's a hobby. But this isn't a hobby for us. I probably put 30 hours a week minimum, 40, sometimes 50. I mean, in 10 days, I'm riding my Harley across country from San Marcos to Miami, stopping at 9 different stops, and we're going to raise over $50,000 because 9 Harley dealerships said, yeah, we'll all pledge to raise $5,000 each. We'll probably run up raising $75,000.
That's awesome.
But again, you get on the bike, you show up, and you ride. And in my case, you ride and you sweat and you lose 10 pounds in 10 days because it's going to be blazing.
August is a great time to do that.
July 21st to the 31st is when I'm doing that. But we got support this year, and I'm not right. Last year I did it. I rode a round trip after my buddy Dave killed himself in Montana, and his parents said, "Would you come to South Carolina and give the eulogy?" So at the height of COVID, I said, "Yeah, man, I'll hop on my bike and do it." And it just kind of blew up. Nick Velez started posting on social media, and we had local media in every town, and people started donating. And again, I get it. There's a lot of guys. The whole nonprofit thing it's a lot, and you can get over it pretty fast because it's a lot of work. But during that trip, I love to share this story because I don't even remember what city it was in, but we stop at a gas station. And by the way, Pete Turner, who runs the Break It Down show, he created it. He says, "Hey, I'm going to stop everything I'm doing. I got this new show called The Prison Chronicles. I'm going to put it on hold. I'm going to follow you all the way out." 16 days round trip.
Wow.
And so Pete's following me. We're doing our required social media posting, giving updates to everybody that's following us. And this dude is a plumber, kind of hijacks. He comes around the gas pump. He says, "Hey, man, I was eavesdropping on your post." He said, "Man, I'm going to tell you, my dad was a vet, and I really appreciate what you're doing." I always start crying when I tell this story. He says, "I want to give you $40 for your next tank of gas, man. I just really love what you're doing." And it was again one of those singular moments where the best of the human condition was exposed to me. So through all of the war, all the fighting, all the loss, all the trauma, all the wins, all the losses, there's these moments that if you stop and listen and you take stock in those things, it really does expose the best of the human condition. At the height of COVID, when people are lost, they're isolated, they want to get out, they want to be led, they want to feel connected, and to be able to do that and be some sort of mechanism for that for some segment of the population, and for my Marines, and to raise a bunch of money, we raised $35,000, and it wasn't even a fundraiser. And to honor Dave,
That's awesome.
And be there for his family, like it was pretty cool.
What was Dave like?
Have you seen Tommy Boy?
Yeah.
Yeah, on steroids. Yeah, he was Chris Farley. Big, heavy set. He's a Navy vet, wrestled in the Navy. I remember one time in college, we did just partying like rock stars at Illinois State, and Dave came up, and our whole life we've been connected. And his mom probably fed me more meals in high school than my own stepmom did. So, but yeah, he was big gregarious dude, but just suffered. It wasn't a combat vet. Just had a lot of struggles in life, a lot of depression, which is a very real thing that everybody deals with at some level.
Yep.
And he drank himself to death. And so, but the ride's going to be cool. It's going to be really hot this year again. I think it was 118 in Yuma.
Wow.
So that's my contribution. I wasn't even going to ride this year, but Phil knows the Marines have a very unique talent. They utilize this one leadership trait and technique called shame. Shame.
You got shamed in, huh?
Yeah, I was down in Texas. And these guys said, "Hey, we doing the ride again this year, Scott?" I said, "Well, I wasn't planning on it." And then they start needling me. I was like, "Oh, come on, you can't do this." I said, "I rode 5,150 miles last year in July because I didn't pick the month. The month picked me because of Dave." And so this year we said, "All right, well, let's do it. But we're only going to go cross country, and we'll do like a relay race." And so we've got riders now in every city: Tucson, El Paso, Odessa, Dallas, Meridian, Tallahassee, Tampa, and Miami. So everybody's, and I said, well, I'll ride the whole thing. So I'll be riding the whole way, but I'll have support around me this year. And then all the Harley dealerships and a bunch of local businesses and breweries and stuff, they're doing events for us, and they're going to raise funds. So it's going to be really cool.
Awesome.
But so maybe next year I'll just ride to Dallas and then fly back and kind of wean myself off of this ride, get it out of my system. But
You just need a relay partner.
you can ride. Get on your Vespa.
His
I'll ride a Vespa.
His
Dude.
Schwinn.
I'm
That
not.
would be
That's not
scary.
an insult. Yeah, I'll ride a Vespa.
How many people are going?
Oh, I think. I mean, riding it's not a continuous ride. Like we spend the night in every city, because I'm riding like 500 miles a day, anywhere from 350 to 500 miles a day. So it's a grind, and it's hot.
Wow.
But again, that's my contribution. I think when I stopped doing this, like everybody will ride the Southern route. It'll always be in July because I want people to suffer. I want them to feel the heat. Now, honestly, I'm not saying that it's from some sadistic Marine Corps philosophy.
I mean, kind of.
Kind of are, yeah. Sounds like it.
There's a little bit of fun in it, of the grind, of the experience, right?
But I can couch that with the fact that I want them to suffer, to always remember what they're riding for. And that's how I can legitimize that.
Yeah,
But
connects
it
them to
really
the
is.
cause.
It's like, hey, if you're hot and you're suffering, just remember there's someone out there suffering in a different way, and this is why we're doing this. And at the end of the day, you're out riding your bike, you're getting some, wind therapy, and it's cool. You meet a ton of cool people, like the plumber, and so many cool people in Texas. And then this year, one of the guys that came and supported me last year, Mike Carnell, we found out Mike has stage 4 liver and colon cancer in January. So we're paying off his mortgage, and we've already raised a bunch of money, and we're going to take that rock out of that Marine's pack. And so that's one of the reasons we're riding, and it's going to be cool. But
That's awesome.
Again, talk about helping people, whether you're employees or total strangers, and making that impact in their lives is just start with that one person. And at the end of the day, you're probably helping an exponential amount. You really are, through your actions, through caring. I think that those are essential things that really sustain me.
Do you connect that with helping with leadership?
Absolutely. I mean, you want your business to succeed. You want your company to thrive. And to do that as a leader, you have to understand that every one of those people that help build the foundation, that run the organization, have to be provided with the best training and the best tools to be successful. And that means you have to care. You have to do that. You have to give of yourself. You have to give of your resources. If you hoard all of the company profits, all of the success for yourself, what does that do for anybody? What does that do for your company? What does that do for you as a leader? I know how I would view the person in charge of me if they did that. I don't think that company would be around that long. Mm-hmm. I don't think you would survive that long on the battlefield if you had that type of leadership.
We talked a lot about the veterans, but for two guys like us, if we're looking to hire veterans, is there advice to the business owners of how to interact, what to expect? I mean, do you do any interaction with that?
I do. I gladly offer up my network to those in the private sector. I'm not an HR dude. Again, I just like sharing the right talent with people. Here's one recent example. My neighbor, Brandy Roderick, she sends me an email. She's like, "Hey Scott, we're filming a movie at the winery at Robert Renzoni, right around the corner of my house." And she says, "Hey, do you know any veterans that would like to be production assistant on this?" I said, "Man, I'll find out." So I farmed this gig out to a couple, and instantly I got 3 queries, introduced them to Brandy. I mean, Brandy's amazing. And I just had a lunch with some people at Renzoni, and she's like, "Oh my God, this guy was amazing, and he wound up acting in the thing and did this." And I was like, "This is cool, So this guy is a transitioning Navy vet, didn't even know the dude, but I like to create opportunities if I can and do that. But for business owners that are out there, to really answer your question, I suppose, is if you're looking for people that are disciplined, not self-disciplined. Because I always say that it's like there's no such thing as self-discipline. You're disciplined. You do this. You have a regiment. You apply it and you practice it. That's a discipline. So self-discipline, I don't get it. What's self-discipline? There's just discipline. If you're running an organization, you want people that are disciplined. There's a vast pool, and it's a very select pool, because the great thing about veteran applicants, to all of you in the HR world that are out there, these people have already been screened in depth. So you're really getting some of the best that America has to offer. Less than 0.5% of the entire American population of over 333 million people in this country, you're already pre-screened. So you've kind of got a pretty good idea of what you're getting. Now, don't get me wrong. Like everybody's got their 10%. I mean, not everybody's MARSOC and flying jets and jumping out of helicopters and kicking doors in. But there's a lot of support personnel, too, that are great at their jobs. Administrators, logisticians, all of those guys are really what enable guys like us to do what we do and be successful. But, you know, every organization also has disciplinary problems. Every organization has motivation problems. We're not exempt from that either. But for the employers and HR people that are listening, you know, it's worth connecting to those types of veteran organizations who provide those resources. Right here in California, I will give you one. The Marine Executive Association. If you go to the Marine Executive Association, it is a massive website of jobs from people that throw their jobs in the bucket and know that only Marines are looking at the job. So not only are you just now tapping into the select veteran population, you're tapping into the Marine Corps population who are like, hey, I want Marines. I know these Marines are badasses. I know they are hard chargers. They are mission oriented. They can thrive with limited supervision and be successful for my company. Go to the Marine Executive Association, and there's your first start.
We're about to be the only insurance agency on there.
Well, I think you know, something Scott spoke to earlier, which was, you know, hey, the importance of commander's intent, right? There's often this stereotype of, well, you know, they just wait for orders and do as they're told. Like, the whole purpose behind commander's intent is purpose. Like, they understand what needs to be accomplished at the end of the day. They'll figure out the how, and they'll take the initiative, and they'll make decisions with that, you know, but let them, and they'll run with it. So I just wanted to throw that on top.
Yeah,
So.
I like that.
Should we move to rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Rapid fire?
Rapid fire.
I like rapid fire.
All right. What's the first thing you noticed when you just met Gabe or someone like Gabe?
Beard.
You've traveled all over the world. What's the one place you want to go next?
America.
I'm going to be interested to see if he can answer this, because if it came at
It's
me,
the
I'd
best
be
country
like,
in the
"What?"
world. I've been to 70 different countries. And it gives me, because it gives me perspective. And people say, where should I travel? Stay in America. I'm not saying don't get perspective. I'm saying, like, this is the greatest country on the planet. Despite anything going on in the political, social landscape right now, greatest country on the planet. No one needs to lose any sleep tomorrow. We're going to be around for another, 250 plus years. This democracy is going to thrive.
Heck yeah. So if you're going to run for public office in the greatest country in the world, what would your slogan be?
My slogan for office, vote Scott.
Vote Scott.
I mean, if I got to...
I would have gone with your command philosophy.
I thought you were going to say something like America's great or something.
Winning with Scott.
Winning with
I like
Scott.
that.
Win the day.
Buy my book. That's my slogan. And then I drop out of the race, sell 5,000 books.
That's a good transition.
All right,
to the
transition
next
to favorite book not called Echo in Ramadi.
I'm going to go with a classic, Once an Eagle by Anton Meyer, a novel, and then Next Generation. I'm going to give you three. Once an Eagle, World War II. Matterhorn by my good friend Carl Marlantes, another novel, Vietnam vet, Navy Cross recipient, and then a non-veteran current day book, Tribe by Sebastian Junger, and also just released Freedom by Sebastian Junger. He's a frequent guest on our show. Not a vet, but gets what we do. And then Andrew Biggio would be pissed off at me because I sold his book called The Rifle by Andrew Biggio. that just came out.
All right.
We got some good reading material there.
I tell you, Freedom is Great by Sebastian Younger. I just finished that. I just interviewed him on the Break It Down show with Pete Turner. Next question. Sorry.
Awesome. Next question. What's something you absolutely hate to do?
Something I hate to do. Taxes is too trite. I do hate it.
Yeah, it's very hateable.
Yeah, I have a lot of pet peeves, but hate's a strong word.
All right. What's your biggest pet peeve? Let's go with that one.
Oh, my biggest pet peeve? Laziness.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right. If we asked your wife to describe you in 1 or 2 words, what would they be?
Difficult.
I was going to guess organized chaos.
Yeah, difficult.
Difficult. That's a good one. All right. 2021 is going to be the year of what for Scott?
2021. Well, we're halfway through
The rest of it.
The rest of the second half of
Second
2021.
half.
Well, we've got the ride coming up. It's going to be a great year for Save the Brave. And then when we get the documentary funded, I think that's going to be a real milestone for what we're doing with this film. Anthony Zucker is my executive producer for this film called The Gray City. I'm not going to give away any more than that, but I think really this year is really going to thrust me into getting back out speaking and really kind of transitioning into more film work and sharing stories through that medium, because I think that there's going to be a resurgence in that based off of what the industry needs, because they're really starved for content right now. And I'm working with another legendary production company right now to try and they want me on board to do some writing for them. So
I'm always have been curious about film. Like, how does the funding of it work? Is it Anthony who's doing it? You, production company?
There's a lot of different ways to get works funded. I mean, there's indie film productions. You can do Kickstarters. You can do this. You can seek private investors. There's rules to who you can ask to be an investor. You guys know this. Who are qualified investors, where the monies go, how much you can make from becoming an investor, how much the fund is needed. Like if you have X amount of dollars, then certain people can only make a certain amount of money off of what it's budgeted for. There's rights. There's all kinds of ways to get it funded, vice having your work or your manuscript or a book optioned for a screenplay. That's like apples and oranges, but I'm really learning as I go. And again, the vast amount of success I've had in life has been by surrounding myself with smart people and asking stupid questions, because you don't know what you don't know. And it really is. Yeah. And just be humble, man. Like, I don't think Marines get accused of being humble often, but we are probably some of the most humble creatures, because we do ask a lot of basic questions, because it's essential to continue to be successful. So I'm always asking those in the industry what to do. I'm very fortunate too, because a lot of guys on the podcast, I have access to them. I enjoy that access, so I can call, guys like Hilliard Guess or Billy Ray or Scott Keller, all these guys, that are just, phenomenal filmmakers. And, I send them a text. I'm like, hey, man, I got a question about this. And they're like, yeah, give me a call. Sometimes it's 10 o'clock at night, man. I'm on the phone, with Billy, and he's like breaking it down to me shotgun style. Like, yeah, you want to do this, make sure you do this. And I'm thinking, man, this is awesome.
I have a question on the transparency part. Is that something you've always been? Is this part of your personality, or is that something that you, over time, you've said, hey, this is something that's important to me?
No, I think like most people, I was completely full of shit and didn't share a lot of myself, because when you're in a leadership position too, you're trained to have, and we instill this sense of bravado, and you wear that mask of command that I talked about, is like, because one person asked me, like, was it hard for you to show emotion? Obviously in Echo and Ramadi, I barfed a lot of my life into that book, a lot of the pain, a lot of things that the Marines never even saw of me, the things I was dealing with, which made me more human to them. But I wasn't always transparent. And I think in a leadership role, you can be authentic, you can be compassionate, you can be understanding, but it doesn't mean you have to be weak. And I say this often is, we're really great in the Marine Corps about leadership traits and principles, and we plaster it all over our locker rooms and winning strategies. But there's words like love and caring and compassion and understanding. Those aren't written in any of the textbooks professional warriors read in the schools we attend or on those posters for recruiting guys. But those are the words that really great leaders in any organization see in between the lines. If you're one of those guys and you can do that and still wear that mask, I think you're probably better off than I was if you learned that earlier on in life. And that's why I like to share that with people, because I was up at Camp Pendleton here, and I had 350 midshipmen, I think it was last month. It was right before I did the Gen Next thing. And as those guys, that was their one, probably the most important question to those guys is, how will I appear to those I lead? So
all those words you use, like love and all that, you didn't incorporate that during your military career? This is like a retrospective.
I did, but again, I don't think I did it early enough in my career. I don't think I listened enough in my career. I don't think I applied those consistently throughout my career. And if there's one thing I do know about the military, and especially Marines, we love each other. It's this inextricable bond that we share, and these creatures love each other more than anything I've ever seen. It's just it's almost indescribable how tight the network is. But I don't look back and have regret.
Yeah.
Because I think I gave enough. I think I gave more than most. And I don't say that for any,
that's just to be transparent, right?
Yeah, it's just to be like I said, I wrote this book, and there was, for those of you who don't know, like doing math in public, I don't do it, but every average book that you see the size, there's about 80 to 90,000 words in a book. Okay, how do I know that? I Googled it. How to write a book? Google it. How many chapters in a book? Google it. How many words are in a chapter? Google it. How to find an agent? Google it. How to sell a book? Google it. This is how I learned how to write, by the way. Thank you, Google. And a couple other great, smart people that I surrounded myself with. But when the book grew to about 130,000 words, when I was doing word count, I was perseverating on this word count because I thought it was everything. And then I sent the manuscript to my editor, and she says, stop. You got to stop writing. And then she read it, and she came back to me, and she said, this is amazing. Like, this is going to be a bestseller. But it's too long. So she started chopping pieces. So we got it down to like 100,000 words. And then it got down to whatever. And I reread it, and I thought, less is better. And getting rid of a lot of words. And then she came back to me and said this important thing. These stories are so amazing, and the people and the character development is so amazing in this story, but it's missing one thing. You didn't write about yourself enough in this. So again, we're humble to a fault as Marines, but that was the time where I had to look at myself and say, it wasn't fair for me when I wrote Echo and Ramadi to make all these phone calls and talk to all these families and talk to these Marines and pick that scab open for them and have them share these intimate personal details if I wasn't willing to do that myself. And in doing so, I divulged probably one of the most painful, embarrassing, there's multiple embarrassing moments that some are humorous, but others are more stark realizations about how you have to improve and how you have to deal with your own mess when you make it. And I shared that. It was an easy thing to do. I won't tell you what it is. If you're listening, go buy the book and find out for yourself. We are also taught strategy in the Marine Corps and as writers, but it was tough, man, because you don't get to take that back. Once you barf your life into 300 pages and it's sitting at Barnes & Noble or on Amazon, you can't take it back. But again, being transparent in everything I do now and coming on shows and just hanging out and not, a lot of stuff I say is, I get a lot of the same questions. So I appreciate it when I get different questions because I always ask people, like, what's the one question that you want to be asked? I don't even know what that one question is. Like, I'm always, when someone does it and when you're in the show and they go, oh man, that's a good question. Kind of like the campaign thing. Like that, it's not a good question, but it's a tough question. Yeah. Like, I really like those because just like this other new film project I'm working on, it's like, it really gets you out of your comfort zone. So.
All right, Scott. Well, you talked a lot about transparency, and I think in leadership that, having that vulnerability, it does create a lot of trust in people around you, trust in people you're leading. And kind of to transition to that, from that, one of the things that, you've had this amazing journey and you've done all these things in your 24-year career in the military, and then you've been really successful after. When you look back and reflect on that, what would you tell your 18-year-old self today, looking back?
I would tell him to listen more. Yeah. I mean, again, giving advice all the time. If I wasn't giving that advice to myself, again, this whole episode would be debunked, because that was my big thing. Was I'd tell that guy, listen, make time to listen, or train yourself to be a better listener. Because for people like me, it's a learned skill. Some people get it naturally, and I marvel at them. But
that's like
for some.
Gabe has it.
I know.
Yeah, no, he has it for sure.
I can sense it.
He's like 100% empathy, and I'm like 0. And so I'm like always trying to suck some of that listening skill off him. All right, so mine is regrets. No, I'm just kidding. It's not.
Full rather on me.
It's not. So the show's called Discover the Difference. And I feel like I know the answers just from listening to you already, but what's the difference in Scott Huesing as a leader, as a motivator, as somebody who's, out doing good things for other people in the world?
What's the difference?
What's the difference in you versus anyone else? What's your special sauce or ingredient that brings you to life?
I'm a connector. That's what I do. I don't think I could sum it up in any other word.
Yeah.
Whether it's helping people who need transition help. I mean, you get a lot. I'm a hybrid because I'm so lucky to be surrounded by so many different people in so many different fields, that being able to share that and connect those people, I think that's the difference between me. There are people out there, there are veterans, there are business people that I know that don't share that. So that's what makes me different. That's what makes me special, in the fact that I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to give probably the most valuable thing I have, and that's my time, to connect people and make sure that they're successful. Because again, whether it's in business, as a venture, whether it's in writing, creating, starting a nonprofit, fixing your tire, helping you move out of your apartment, I'm going to either be there for them or connect them with someone that can help them be successful. I think that's essential. But there are people that won't do that. I mean, I've run across it firsthand. There's people that talk a big game, and there's people that act and serve others, and that's the difference. Yeah. Is I really feel, and I don't, again, I think that at the beginning and end of every day, whether I'm doing work for SaveTheBrave.org, whether I'm helping a veteran, or whether I'm helping someone in the civilian sector, or any conference I go to speak to, I like to think that they're going to pull something from me that's going to make themselves better. That's really the goal. That's the difference.
All right. Well, any parting words? How can people find you, help you, connect with you?
Hey, if you were listening to the show, discovering that difference, and you want to learn more, go to SaveTheBrave.org. Click the donate button. You probably won't ever see the difference you're making. Probably won't know that you helped fund a scholarship for a girl that survived veteran suicide and she goes off to law school or becomes a doctor. You probably won't see that difference ever, but you will know, and that's the most important thing. So go to SaveTheBrave.org. If you want to find out about me, have me come speak to your organization, you can go to ScottHuesing.com. You can find me on social media at Echo in Ramadi on Instagram, Facebook. It's pretty hard to hide in the shadows now. So, but yeah, SaveTheBrave.org, ScottHuesing.com. You can book me for an event. And Echo and Ramadi on social media and follow me. You can follow savethebrave.org on Instagram too, and watch me as I ride across country and see all the amazing people, because we're going to have his social media team and these guys. This Marine donated his 36-foot Pace Arrow RV, and he's going to follow. He's driving from Texas first, picking us up here, driving us across the country in his RV, and that's where the crew is going to sleep. It's going to be badass.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're gonna follow that.
Yeah, we're following
so
that for sure.
Yeah, it's really heartening, to watch these people come out and.
Yeah.
But hey, thank you guys for having me on the show. Thanks to the crew. These guys don't get any love, I know, but the crew. These
They're the ones that make it all happen.
They do. They
Absolutely.
do.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much.
All right, thanks,
for
Scott.
coming on.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, look forward to being back.